Hello, and welcome to the Interaction Field series of shows. This is a special series of live streams that are all about conversations with incredible marketers, strategists, business thinkers, and I mean, amazing, really, truly amazing. And we are really, really lucky today that we have got Lane Keller, who is a real incredible, renowned marketing thinker. He's a professor at Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth College, and he's highly respected when it comes to branding and marketing. You could kind of say he wrote the book on it, because actually he wrote the book on it. He wrote Strategic Brand Management, which is regarded as the branding Bible. And he's also the co-author of the classic marketing management textbook. An amazing thinker and lovely guy. We've had some great chats already. But let me tell you about the reasons for these Interaction Field shows. In fact, let me introduce you to the reason for these Interaction Field shows. This is Eric Jochimsthaler, who is the founder of Vivaldi, and it's all because of you. so Eric, you've got a book that's coming out in, my goodness, it's less than 2 weeks now.
Yes.
And you've already got pre-printed copies now, don't you? I think they've just arrived. Oh, fantastic. So the Interaction Field, could you very briefly explain what we mean by an interaction field, so that the viewers can get an idea before we get started?
Absolutely. You know, we all live in an interaction field. We realize it or not. You know, we are online all the time, even in the middle of the night. You know, we are tracking. Some have sleep applications. Everything connects. Not only we are connected socially, things are connected. Our coffee machines, our wake up, our mobile phone is connected at all times. This creates a hyperconnectivity, which I call an interaction field. And what that means is that, and why I'm interested in that is because it changes the way you have to think about business and how you think about brands, and how do you create value for everyone in what I call shared value.
Fantastic. So now let us meet Kevin, who is welcome, Kevin. You're joining us from home, up by Dartmouth College. So welcome to the show. What we're going to be talking today about branding and marketing, and particularly its relevance to interaction fields, to this kind of like platform economy. Now, one of the things that has been a term in marketing for the last 30 plus years is marketing myopia. About the blind spots, the incredible blind spots that the marketing industry has. Have they changed? And does the platform economy, is it bringing new blind spots to life?
Well, marketing myopia, it is one of those chapter 1 marketing concepts. So it's so basic and kind of fundamental. And the notion being that it's really important to not think of yourself as a marketer or as a company selling products or services, but that you're satisfying needs, supplying benefits, and solving problems. And so just changes the focus, because if you're doing that, then you think of all kinds of other things beyond maybe the specific products you're selling or the specific services. So an essential marketing concept, and very appropriate now, because that's, I think good companies have always embraced that. The difference is now I have the ability to maybe solve problems and supply the benefits and satisfy needs in ways I never could before, but it's not just by myself. And that was the big difference, because before it was more the firm thinking of how to do that. Now it's like, who do I work with? How do I collaborate? Who, in what ways? How do I, and how can I take whatever information's out there to try to come up with better solutions, if you will, and in better ways to satisfy. So it's an interesting evolution of marketing fundamental, but I think it has all kinds of implications and really important. It also reminds those, and some people never caught up with the original marketing myopia, kind of 1.0. We've moved on to 2.0 now, so hopefully they'll catch up. But I mean, that recognition and that realization is really profound and really important.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, Eric, when we were talking about this fact that there's businesses interacting with each other and collaborating, and this new collaboration area, and you're exploring this in the book, how are you seeing that affecting branding by itself?
Well, like Kevin said, you typically in order to solve a consumer needs and wants, you always thought of just one company, and you said what product, what service, what, if you will, what products and services I deliver that satisfies a certain needs and wants in consumers' mind and or in consumers' lives, and what is it, and collaboration meant in the past. I work with certain partners to produce, let's say, a product or service that then I brand and offer to the consumer. Now in the new world is where everything connects. It is not just a company. It's what we call an ecosystem, a platform, if you will, that collectively offers or solves consumer needs, and therefore that changes the way brands work.
Yeah. Now, Kevin, brands, by their very definition, have always just been egotistical entities. It's all about us. But now we're talking about this world of collaboration, where brands are sort of operating in the same ecosystem and working together. Are you seeing the whole idea of marketing and branding sort of changing for this world of collaboration? Are you seeing brands loosening up in some way to be able to work together?
Well, you have to work together, and the question is how you brand that. That's where the interesting. So organizationally, and there's always been that aspect of marketing with companies. It's not as if there weren't collaborations and haven't been collaborations for decades in different forms. And we even as brand marketers, we would talk about ingredient branding and the realization that there are times we wanted to highlight some of our partnerships, if you want to call them that, in terms of suppliers and certain ingredients that created enough value that we would actually then, as marketers, we would want to highlight that. At the same time, it's that there's the other side of this coin, if you will, in terms of those other companies, and now as they build their brands, what they want. And I think that's what's interesting now is from a brand marketer standpoint, I'm thinking about the ecosystem, as Eric said, and I'm thinking about how I pull everything together. How do I, there's going to be value created. How's that shared value going to work? And how am I going to communicate that? And who has responsibility? Who has what kind of involvement? All of that has to be sort of thought through. And so I think it's again an important evolution, important next step in terms of brand marketing is understanding how to tell that story and how to build that story, partnerships and collaborations, and in different ways, and in the ecosystems that get created and the alliances that are sort of part of that. So I think that's going to be really crucial. I think getting that right and to create maximum value and figuring out the right way to sort of balance that.
So, Kevin, does this require new skills for marketers? Do the existing old marketing skills, do they still apply? What's the stuff that we need to keep, and what's the stuff that we need to they need to learn now?
Well, the marketing skills, I think there's clearly a digital technological side that's just critically important, understanding how that works. You know, the enduring aspects are sort of understanding consumers and customers and people, and that's always going to be, I think, fundamentally important to marketing, and having really rich understanding of that in a more complicated world where you've got a lot of data and information that can be very helpful, but can also maybe obscure other things if you're not careful and not trying to really truly find out what's in the head, the hearts, and the actions that a consumer or a customer or an organization is kind of taking. But I think that the new skills are going to be not just working within a company. That was the old model, the hub, if you will, and the spoke of the brand manager within a company. It's going to extend out beyond in terms of being able to work with others. And I think with consumers, it's now going to not just be more the individual consumer, understanding the network of consumers, the community of consumers. So I think that's one of the differences, I think, is that expansion, both on the supply side and the demand side, and understanding those in a really full way, and factoring that in to the decision making, which now is going to be driven by platforms and ecosystems, and in a much richer depiction of what the brand stands for.
Think for example, Amazon is a good example. Everybody knows Amazon. Amazon used to sell books, right? And then they became the biggest bookseller. Then they went from one category to the other. Essentially, for a long time, Amazon was a retailer, an online retailer, an e-commerce retailer that would sell books online and everything else that they could sell online. But something's fundamentally changed in the last 10 years and 15 years. Now Amazon, the biggest part of Amazon is not the retail business where they buy things like a book and sell the book. The biggest part is now 6 million third-party sellers that sell under the name of Amazon and use the Amazon, if you will, ecosystem and platform. So there's as Kevin says, on one side, you have 6 million sellers, and Amazon needs to have the skills to manage that side of the business. They are individual small businesses, sometimes larger businesses that are basically part of that platform. And then on the other side, you have 100 millions and more prime customers, let's say. And so to Kevin's example, there's a community that develops among those shoppers that are part of the Amazon, if you will, ecosystem. So it's an entirely different world. In the old days, branding used to be this thing that to shape the perception around your product that you have created through manufacturing, R&D, and so forth, and design, and then you sell, or your company has created. So you brand the company, but now you really have a very different dynamic. You have a brand, and constantly evolving, if you will, ecosystem on the supply side. Those 6 million sellers constantly evolve, and you have the same thing on the demand side. The community that builds around people that love Amazon.
So let me pick up on that. So Dave, just a second, I want to jump back in. But because one of the interesting things, so Eric sort of alluded to on the on the Amazon, it was a great example, interesting example for sure. And but there's this whole notion. So I'm stepping back. There's this integrated. We've always talked about integrated communications, all different ways you can communicate. And clearly there's integrated channels now because there's so many different ways that you can buy things, even from the same company, Nike or whoever, but the whole range of that. And what's interesting now is then, so that's the classic push and pull and that dynamic of how to pull that together and try to make sure the whole is greater than the sum of the parts and all of that. But now you have, I think, in terms of, again, the classic 4 Ps, if you want to think of it that way, but on the kind of product side or the offering side, that now needs to be integrated because it's not just a product, it is a platform or ecosystem where you are trying to pull things together to create maximum value. And then on the consumer side, if you want to think of that, so it's not truly the 4 Ps, we're going to drop price and bring in customer, but that side, then you've also got this community, and you're also thinking of, in some sense, kind of integration in how, because ideally you would create a community of consumers and customers so that, again, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts and all of that synergies that you might get. So that, I think that's the interesting, evolution of marketing, is how the push and the classic push and pull, which has been already for years sort of in this multiplicative, format in some sense, structure. And now we're seeing that even with on the kind of company and consumer or customer side. And so those are those to me, thinking of those and realizing those, and then in the art and science of integrating each of those 4, whoever does that well is gonna be really in great shape.
I think that, Kevin, what is the real important thing is that we used to be, in our mindset as marketers, used to be that we control those 4 P. We design the marketing mix. We are in charge of communications. Look at the example. I have it in my book as well. GoPro. GoPro has an amazing camera. The camera is really, if you're an amateur surfboarder and you like snow, you like the water, you're a surfer, you love a GoPro. GoPro is a high quality. It allows you to make pictures like a Go Professional. That's why the name, like a professional, because of the whole portfolio and architecture it provides, if you will, a portfolio of products and accessories. And the camera, the Hero 8 now, is really, really great. But the marketing and the brand promise to what we deliver, what GoPro delivers, isn't that much just about the camera. It is still the camera, of course, but it is also the community it creates. Like all the surfers, all the snowboarders that shoot a video, that post it on the GoPro site, that share it with other like-minded extreme sports fanatics or fans. The conversations that take place. So for me, being a GoPro user, it isn't really, the camera is great, but anyway, Sony and Apple can try to compete with them if they want to, Ricoh and Canon. But what it really makes the difference is what the consumer creates. The consumer is actually creating the brand promise. The consumer actually, so we as marketers are no longer in control like in this old push-pull world. We as marketers are really more sort of almost like orchestrating value creation, orchestrating communications, orchestrating the 4 Ps rather than deciding them. Or anyway, so it's sort of a new world.
Yeah,
I've been particularly enjoying your skateboarding videos, Eric, with you doing your kick flips with your GoPro attached to the end. Kevin, when we're talking about community here and this kind of community, there's a lot of marketing departments when they talk about community, it's like that's the job of the social media manager. Is this a different kind of community that we need? And is there a different role that's needed or an expansion to existing roles?
Well, I would sort of think of a little bit of what Eric just said, and community is built in different ways, and social media is certainly one form, a digital way of communicating, but there's an interpersonal aspect to that too, and there's just the classic word of mouth, which is hugely important. The role of family and friends, and especially friends and acquaintances, define friends broadly, because it's not necessarily just your best friends, it's people who happen to tell you information. So that there's that aspect of that. So I think understanding that level of how to sort of encourage and allow for and develop engagement in the right form for the right people is super important. Social media and digital will play a key role in that, but it's certainly not an exclusive role in that. So I think understanding how and thinking of it in that broader, more holistic way is just really important.
I think that Kevin is totally right. So many of the dynamics of community that we know from brand communities from years ago is still valid. You know, the way a community forms the virality. But think about it. If I'm a snowboarder, I don't really care that much about the surfers on the water. So it's in the old days, the brand was at the middle, and then the community was built around the brand. In this day and age, I think communities have very different dynamics. A surfer community is a very different one than a snowboarder community, and they develop their own dynamics. So they require, to your question, Dave, they require some type of governance, and the governance and the rules and guidelines and how a community operates may be very different for the surfers than for the snowboarders, let's say, in the example of the GoPro. So you as a community manager, you need to, as Kevin says, you still need to consider sort of the basic principles of how do you attract them, how do you engage a community. But then you also have very different dynamics. The brand is only an element of it. It's no longer at the center of it. I think that's a big difference.
So with community, there's been something that I've heard marketers discussing over the last few years is when you're looking after a community, it can be hard to understand how that results in sales, the ROI, that linkage. Do people, I mean, there still is a lot of thought within marketing that give people the rational messages, and they will go out there and make the most reasonable choice based on the information you give them. Does that attitude, that approach, does that need to change when we're within a sort of platform kind of business, Kevin?
Well, the thing I would say, I kind of come back to one of the things we started with, which is the enduring importance of value. And I think, anyone who ignores value right now is crazy, because in this situation that we're faced now, and certainly in all times, certainly now, the enduring importance of value. And fundamentally, now again, value is a rich concept. It is the benefits, all different kinds of benefits, not just financial, not just logistical, psychological, and then all the costs. So you have to understand it in a very, complex way, or a very complete way, comprehensive way. But I think that, that piece is so important, in terms of that. That said, you have to then think beyond, just that, the functional aspect of that, to think of those social, think of those emotional, and all those different kinds of benefits, and the role that the brand plays is part of that, and the role that a community plays is part of that. And that's the one thing to keep in mind, because there's some of the community stuff, and this is the tricky part, because there's when you think about engagement, there's a transactional part of engagement that isn't always relationship building. So, and that can be certain social media and other things where I'm consuming everything but the brand. And so I think the brand has to be part somehow of the equation. To Eric's point, it doesn't necessarily have to be in spotlights at the center, but somehow I've got to change the way, as a marketer, I mean, ultimately, I've got to figure out how directly or indirectly, short run or long run, I'm changing knowledge, I'm changing the way people think, feel, and act in a way that is going to help my brand or help the mission of my brand. And I've got to make sure that that happens. So I think that's the part with community, is understanding and trying to, and realizing that the pure transactional, some of that may not be all that helpful directly. Now, maybe indirectly, but I better understand that, and I better know how to tap into that.
And Eric, it's when we're looking at these interaction fields, I guess it's not just one community. It's a community of communities. Does that require, well, before I ask that question, can I just say that to everyone who's watching, please, in the comments, give us your comments. We want your questions, we want your comments, because maybe in about 5-10 minutes or so, I'll be able to start bringing those in. So if you've got any questions, comments, please add them just now. Eric, when it comes to sort of communities of communities, because it's not just your consumers necessarily, it can be your competitors, it can be your suppliers, it can be all sorts of people, even government people who can be part of your ecosystem. Does that require somebody at the top of the company to be creating a way of leading all of those communities? How do you manage that? It starts to become a burden, I think, for quite a lot of companies who aren't ready for it.
I mean, look, I call this an interaction field company, and I give you an example. A very simple one is Tesla. We all know cars. Tesla is a good example. Compare this to a traditional car company. A traditional car company is, like Kevin said, is in the transaction business. You know, they sell cars to dealers, and that's when the dealer bought the car and he has it on his parking lot, basically, or on his sales lot or a dealer lot, if you will, then that sale has been consumed. That's the transaction. If you look at the Tesla, for example, it works in a very different way. Tesla and Elon Musk, of course, is these days very much celebrated. You look at the stock price, and as it has developed, it's going exponential. I call it the what the fuck curve of stock price. Why I didn't see that one coming, let's say, and there's a reason why, because what Elon Musk in this case, there are other good examples, has created not only an amazing pipeline to produce in some state-of-the-art ways a product that then is sold to consumers, but which is a pipeline business, but also it has created, to your point, these various communities. There is a community of drivers. There is a network of charging stations where Tesla drivers can charge for free. There is a community of people that are more socially conscious, that actually buy the solar panel from Tesla, they buy the power battery for the garage. They produce, actually, in California sun, they produce the electricity and actually feed those electricity back to the grid. So there's a community of people who live in a more sustainable way. So if you look at these communities of communities, so it is possible for a single car company to produce it. He also has now, in the last 2 weeks, actually introduced the idea that he shares with all the other car companies the battery and some of the technology like the autopilot. So I think there's a community of he develops within other car makers in order to solve for some of the bigger problems that we have, like CO2 emissions. And there are communities of consumers. So this is a beautiful evolution of what I call an interaction field companies and managing sort of the complexities of the business we have today.
So over the last few years, a big topic amongst marketers and in general people in business is to talk about purpose, the importance of having a purpose. When we start to get to this interaction field level, do we have a different spin on purpose, or does it become more important, or is it a little bit of a red herring? What's your take on this, Kevin?
Well, actually, I want Eric to start on this, because this is...
I'd be glad to start on it. I also want to be first once at least. Thank you very much. But you know, Kevin, you need to translate it for me. I did not understand the question. There's a British accent in this. Dave, what is it? Partners? Did you say partners?
Purpose.
Oh, purpose.
Purpose, yes.
Okay, there's a different purpose. I see. Yeah, I
think apologize, my Scottish accent.
That's a Scottish accent. Okay, that doesn't translate very well in the Northeast. I live in New York and Kevin, upstate here. Whether there's a different purpose in this, I think that what you see is that again, this is to me sort of the important is the purpose. So most, if you look at the typical car company, like let's stay with Tesla. Clearly, there is a value to a Tesla. It's electric. It has the autopilot. It allows you semi-sleeping, if you will, or semi-autonomous driving. You still need to have your hands on the wheel, but you can actually relax a lot more. Ultimately, it will be fully autonomous, we all hope. and self-driving cars, and there's sort of a benefit to that. There's also a benefit to electricity. As in California, the sun shines all the time. It's called Los Angeles 72 and sunny. So they also have the power. They don't need to buy the gasoline. And the cost of a car, the cost of ownership significantly reduces. So there's a real value for the consumer. But when you think about the larger question that Elon Musk is answering, he's answering a much bigger question. Namely, he's weaning off all of us, off the idea of fossil fuel. He wants to get to a point to zero CO2 emissions. That's all good for us, global warming and so forth and so forth. That's a larger purpose. What I think is important is that when you connect a business, a brand, not only with the value proposition and the promise to the customer, but you also deliver a business model like Tesla that also delivers on the zero CO2 emission or autonomous driving. Like the number of car deaths every year in the United States is staggering. We hope that autonomous driving will reduce the hardship we have from any one of our beloved ones getting killed or having a car accident in any way or form. So there's a lot of benefits, social benefits. What I like very much is that a brand purpose here or a business purpose isn't just a communications device. Isn't it just a hollow promise? It is actually, actually part of the business model. There is nothing more wasteful than to communicate an empty brand purpose, and we see that time and again. And I think that there are these new business models, these digital business models we talk about here. They not only change branding, they change the way we think about purpose and the higher purpose.
Mm-hmm. So Kevin, I'm sure you've got something to add.
No, actually, I do. Although I agree with, I think Eric's points are very well taken. So that, and I knew I wanted him to lead on that because I knew he would state that well. So the thing I would add is, any brand strategy and everything, it's all about, and the meaning you're trying to create in the marketplace and with your, and co-create with your consumers and customers. It's about clarity, it's about cohesiveness, and it's about consistency, over time. So having that. So I think purpose has to fit in just like everything else in that way. And I think the more it does, the more impact it will have, the more it will in terms of helping the brand, but also I think will also outside externally actually be able to achieve, it's part of the business model, it's part of the, the mission, if you will, of the company and the brand in that regard to let that happen. So really important. It's the same thing I always think about emotions. When you talk about feelings and emotions. So a lot of these things that aren't the intrinsic functional aspects of the brand, it's important that they still things fit together in a way that makes sense for everybody, both internally, because that's going to be hugely important in terms of recruiting and retaining talent, and then also externally as you're trying to have impact and trying to sustain that over time. So real important point.
Mm. So well, I've got
what's sort of interesting is what you said is we with less ability to dictate communications or to control communications, with less ability, with the brand almost like being handed over from the producer side, from the typical brand owner to the consumer side who decide what to communicate about the brand or not, who almost like create the brand or co-create the brand. Sort of like, I think that what's sort of important, and I think that's why I can highly recommend Kevin's books, is that you actually need to still look back to those principles. Clarity is creating a clarity of what you stand for, what you aspire to create is so much harder to come by. It's so much harder to achieve. So I think it's almost like if you had to write the book right now on branding that Kevin wrote many years ago and has sort of continuously evolved and in every new edition. It's right now even more so important, those principles that he just brought to bear. How do you make everything connect, the cohesiveness, the clarity, the synergies, that you can create through communications. And so I think it's sort of an interesting thought that that these principles are enduring, and so it's so important, more so and more difficult in this day and age.
Yeah. So I guess it's probably a good place to start wrapping up here. So following on from that, Kevin, just as our sort of last question that I want to ask you is that for your book, Strategic Brand Management, and as Eric's saying that you update that in your sort of different editions, what would you be adding to the next edition of that book? And does any of the things that we talk about here, is that stuff that will make it into some of the updates?
Well, I'm sure it will, and I think that the one thing I sort of to wrap up, to summarize, I think the fascinating thing, it's been really happy to be on this, so thanks for the opportunity. Two, Eric is, in terms of platform thinking, he's been thinking about this, and for a long time, and also in sharing that and actually put it in a book form. I'm excited to get that. So kudos to Eric for doing that. But I think the thing that's just was sort of summarized, the really interesting development is that we talked about is this realization on the platform side, the company side of the role of collaboration in all different forms, but a branding and how you do that in the right way. So, and then on the other side, it's on the consumer side, it's the community and the co-creation. So a lot of words that start with CO are going to end up, already in the book, but we'll find out new ways and think about them in other ways. But that side of it, I think, in that realization of managing that to the extent to which you can, recognizing, of course, that there's a lot of that's going to happen organically and out of your control, and that's fine. But I think that those two sides of that coin, and how to push the thinking as a marketer and think about it in a branding sense to go beyond where we are now, and I think that's the exciting part. I think, so a lot of these themes are ones that people have picked up on, but reinforcing them and finding the nuances that will help lead to new insights and then to new practices.
I mean, when you think about it, we used to brand products, then we used to brand companies, or companies were always branded in some ways. Then we said you can apply branding to celebrities. Then we can say you can brand the most personal branding. You can brand yourself, and there are principles. Then you can brand for hundreds and thousands of years. Religion has been branded in some ways, and music has been branded. A music band is a brand. But what we do here is, and what's sort of so significant is, we are branding here some form of a network. Kevin just talked one side, the producer, which is a network. Think of Airbnb. You don't have travelers if people like myself here to New York. If people like myself in New York don't make a spare room available here in my New York apartment here, and so you need to curate. You need to curate both two sides two or more sides, in fact, in a community of communities world, and the value proposition and the promise and the value creation isn't just one side and the other side. It is both sides. So that didn't exist before, before the world of connectivity, the hyperconnectivity we live in. So I call it the interaction field. But I think that it is a lot more challenging, as we said, and it requires some new principles to apply to make this work.
Great. Well, I'll certainly be bookmarking your Airbnb listing there, Eric, for next time I'm over. Gents, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and for wonderful conversation. And Kevin, especially brilliant, wonderful. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Really much appreciated. For those of you who are watching live, you are amazing. You're part of the special crew. For those of you who are watching again, we love you as well. It's all good. For those of you who gave us some questions, I apologize. I didn't have time to get round to those questions. But we are going to be back with more of these, especially over the next couple of weeks as Eric launches his book. So Eric's book comes out on the 15th. So look out for that in your nearest local Amazon. And yes, thank you very much for coming on the show, gents. And we shall see you viewers very soon. you.